Marcus Chen walked through the corridors of Kepler Station Academy with the same quiet confidence he had displayed for the past 3 months. Students barely glanced his way as he moved between classes, their attention focused on their datapads or conversations about weekend plans. To them, he was just another transfer student from one of the outer colonies. Unremarkable in every way that mattered, the academy served as the premier educational institution for the children of diplomats, military officers, and corporate executives stationed throughout the Centauri sector. Students from dozens of species mingled in the halls, their conversations a mixture of standard galactic and their native tongues. The Zephyrian students, with their crystalline skin that shifted colors with their emotions, clustered near the observation decks. The tall insectoid Manthari clicked and chirped to each other in rapid bursts while reviewing stellar navigation charts. Even a few Corvin youngsters, their 4 arms making them exceptional at multitasking, worked on multiple assignments simultaneously. Marcus fit in by not fitting in. His plain brown hair and average height made him forgettable among the exotic features of his alien classmates. His academic performance hovered consistently in the middle ranges, never excelling enough to draw attention from instructors, nor failing enough to warrant concern. When group projects were assigned, he contributed just enough to avoid complaints but never enough to be remembered as particularly helpful. Dr. Veltar, the Zephyrian headmaster, prided himself on knowing every student at the academy. His crystalline features often glowed with warm amber hues when discussing the achievements of his pupils. Yet when asked about Marcus Chen, he would pause for a moment, his skin shifting to a puzzled purple, before offering generic comments about the boy being adequately adjusted and progressing normally. The only person who seemed to notice Marcus at all was Elena Vasquez, a human girl from the Mars colonies. She sat behind him in advanced xenobiology and had observed his curious habit of asking questions that seemed almost too basic, yet somehow managed to reveal gaps in their instructor's knowledge. Professor Kethmar, a renowned Manthari scientist, would pause at these questions, his compound eyes glittering as he reconsidered points he had been teaching for decades. "Why do you think the hegemony restricts access to certain star systems?" Marcus had asked during a lesson on galactic navigation. It seemed like an innocent question from a student who might not understand the political complexities of interstellar relations. Professor Kethmar had clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "Security concerns primarily. Some systems contain strategic resources or serve as buffer zones between major powers. But what about the systems that don't have strategic value? The ones that are just empty?" The question hung in the air longer than it should have. Several students looked up from their notes, suddenly interested. Even Elena found herself leaning forward, wondering why something so simple felt so significant. That afternoon, Marcus made his way to the Academy's library, a vast digital archive that connected to databases across known space. He settled into one of the private study alcoves, his fingers moving across the holographic interface with practiced efficiency. To any observer, he appeared to be researching his assignment on comparative stellar formation. In reality, he was accessing communication logs, shipping manifests, and patrol reports from across the sector. The data painted a picture that would have troubled anyone looking closely enough. Ships had been disappearing in the Outer Rim territories, not in the dramatic fashion of pirate attacks or system failures, but simply vanishing from tracking systems. Trade routes were being quietly rerouted. Military patrols were being reassigned to cover gaps that officially didn't exist. Marcus cross-referenced the missing vessels with their cargo manifests and crew rosters. The pattern was subtle but unmistakable. Each ship had been carrying something beyond their official cargo, and each crew had included at least one individual with specific technical expertise in fields that the galactic hegemony had classified as sensitive research areas. As evening approached, Marcus gathered his materials and prepared to leave the library. He had learned long ago to limit his research sessions to avoid triggering the Academy's monitoring systems. The data he collected would be uploaded to secure servers during his scheduled exercise periods, when the station's security protocols were focused on monitoring the gymnasium and recreation areas rather than the dormitory network access points. Walking back to his quarters, Marcus passed groups of students discussing their plans for the upcoming Harmony Festival, a celebration that brought together cultures from across the galaxy. The Zephyrian students were practicing traditional light displays that made their skin pulse in synchronized patterns. Manthari youngsters worked on complex musical compositions that incorporated sounds beyond the range of most species' hearing. Human students planned Earth-style fireworks displays that would paint the artificial sky of the station in brilliant colors. Marcus smiled politely when Elena waved at him from across the corridor, but he didn't join the planning committees or volunteer for decorating duties. Instead, he retreated to his small dormitory room, furnished with the standard academy accommodations that reflected no personal touches or cultural background. Once inside, he activated the privacy screen and sat at his desk. From a hidden compartment in his mattress, he retrieved a device that looked like a standard student datapad, but functioned as something far more sophisticated. The device connected to networks that existed outside the official galactic communication grid, networks that most people didn't know existed. The message he composed was brief and coded in a way that would seem like homework notes to any casual observer. But to the recipients scattered across multiple star systems, it would convey critical intelligence about the pattern of disappearances and the growing evidence of systematic interference with civilian shipping. As he prepared for sleep, Marcus allowed himself a moment of genuine emotion. 3 months of careful observation and patient data collection were finally beginning to reveal the scope of what was happening in this sector. The galactic hegemony, the organization that had brought peace and prosperity to hundreds of worlds, was hiding something significant, and if his suspicions were correct, the truth would change how every species in known space viewed their place in the galaxy. Tomorrow would bring another day of being overlooked and underestimated. But Marcus Chen had learned that sometimes the best place to hide was in plain sight, and sometimes the most dangerous person in the room was the one nobody bothered to notice. The Harmony Festival transformed Kepler Station Academy into a celebration of galactic diversity. Corridors that usually echoed with the sound of hurried footsteps now resonated with music from a dozen different worlds. The air recycling systems worked overtime to accommodate the various atmospheric preferences of visiting families, creating small pockets of different environments throughout the station. Marcus observed the festivities while maintaining his usual low profile. He helped set up tables for the cultural food exchange, a task that kept him busy but largely invisible among the dozens of volunteers. His assigned position near the service corridors gave him an excellent view of the arriving guests without drawing attention to himself. The guest list read like a directory of sector leadership. Admiral Thorne from the human colonial fleet arrived with his wife and younger daughter. Chancellor Zixtel of the Zephyrian Trade Consortium made an appearance that set her crystal blue skin shimmering with pleasure at the warm reception. Even the notoriously reclusive Corvin Ambassador Muldar attended, using all forearms to simultaneously greet different dignitaries while reviewing diplomatic messages on his personal device. Elena found Marcus arranging chairs near the main stage. "You know, for someone who keeps to himself, you've managed to get assigned to the best observation spot in the entire festival." Marcus looked up from his work, offering his practiced smile. "Lucky assignment, I guess. The coordinators needed someone who wouldn't get distracted by all the excitement." "Right," Elena said, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. "Have you noticed anything interesting? Besides the obvious spectacle, I mean." The question caught Marcus off guard. Elena had a habit of asking things that seemed casual, but revealed she was paying more attention than most people realized. He gestured toward the gathering crowd. "It's fascinating to see how different species approach celebration. The Manthari focus on precision and synchronization, while the Zephyrians emphasize emotional expression through their light displays." Elena nodded, but her eyes remained focused on Marcus rather than the festivities. "That's not what I meant, and I think you know it." Before Marcus could respond, the opening ceremonies began. Dr. Veltar took the stage, his crystalline form glowing with warm golden hues as he welcomed the gathered families and dignitaries. The headmaster spoke about unity, understanding, and the bright future that awaited young people who learned to work together across species lines. As the headmaster spoke, Marcus noticed something that would have been invisible to most observers. The security personnel stationed around the venue were not standard academy guards. Their equipment was more sophisticated, their positioning more strategic, and their attention focused not on the crowd, but on specific individuals within it. Admiral Thorne, Chancellor Zixtal, and Ambassador Muldar were all under discreet but intensive surveillance. During the cultural presentations, Marcus excused himself to retrieve additional supplies from the storage areas. The corridors outside the main festival area were surprisingly active for sections that should have been nearly empty. Personnel in civilian clothing moved with military precision, conducting what appeared to be routine maintenance checks on systems that showed no signs of needing attention. Marcus had learned to recognize surveillance operations during his years of training. The festival wasn't just a celebration. It was an opportunity for someone to gather intelligence on sector leadership while they were relaxed and off guard. The question was who was conducting the operation and why. Returning to his assigned station, Marcus found Elena helping to serve refreshments to a group of younger students. She caught his eye and nodded toward a section of the crowd where several adults in formal diplomatic attire were engaged in what appeared to be casual conversation. To most observers, it would look like typical festival socializing, but Marcus recognized the body language of people conducting business while trying to appear relaxed. The Corvin delegation seems very interested in the human military representatives. Elena observed quietly as Marcus rejoined her. Diplomatic courtesy, Marcus replied, though he had noticed the same thing. Different species have different protocols for formal interactions. Elena handed him a tray of beverages for distribution. You know, Marcus, for someone who transferred here from an agricultural colony, you have remarkably sophisticated observations about diplomatic protocols. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's environmental controls. Elena's comment seemed casual, but it revealed she had been researching his background. His official records would show all the appropriate details of a student from the farming settlements of Kepler 442b. But Elena was clearly intelligent enough to notice inconsistencies. I read a lot, he said simply, taking the tray and moving toward the crowd. As he distributed drinks and snacks, Marcus made mental notes of conversations he overheard. The topic seemed innocent enough. Trade agreements, cultural exchange programs, joint research initiatives. But underneath the diplomatic language, he detected something else. Several species were expressing concerns about communication difficulties with outlying colonies. Ships were arriving late or not at all. Research stations were requesting additional supplies and personnel without adequate explanations. The pattern Marcus had been tracking was becoming visible to others, though they didn't yet understand what they were seeing. The galactic hegemony's carefully maintained stability was showing cracks, and sector leaders were beginning to notice. During the evening entertainment, Marcus found an opportunity to access one of the maintenance terminals in a service corridor. His modified datapad interfaced with the station's systems long enough to extract communication logs from the diplomatic quarters. The data would require careful analysis, but preliminary scans revealed message traffic to destinations that didn't appear on any official star charts. When he returned to the festival area, the atmosphere had shifted subtly. The celebrations continued, but Marcus noticed that the adult dignitaries were concluding their conversations and beginning to make polite departures. Whatever business they had conducted was apparently complete. Elena appeared beside him as he cleared tables near the main stage. Successful evening, wouldn't you say? The students seemed to enjoy themselves, Marcus replied. That's what matters, is it? Elena's question carried more weight than her casual tone suggested. Sometimes I wonder if the students are the ones learning the most from gatherings like this. Marcus paused in his work to look at her directly. Elena's expression was friendly but alert, and he realized she had been watching not just him but the entire evening's activities. She had noticed the enhanced security, the diplomatic conversations, and probably the unusual amount of adult attention focused on information gathering rather than celebration. What do you think they're learning? Marcus asked carefully. Elena smiled, but her eyes remained serious. That sometimes the most important lessons happen when you think nobody is paying attention to you. As the festival concluded and students began cleaning up, Marcus reflected on the evening's revelations. The intelligence he had gathered would provide valuable insights into the growing instability in the sector. But Elena's perceptive observations represented a different kind of challenge. Someone at the academy was beginning to see through his carefully constructed cover, and that person was asking exactly the right questions to be dangerous. The next phase of his mission would require even greater care. Because sometimes the greatest threat to a secret operation wasn't sophisticated surveillance or advanced technology. Sometimes it was simply someone smart enough to notice what everyone else overlooked. The academic routine resumed after the Harmony Festival. But Marcus noticed subtle changes in the atmosphere at Kepler Station Academy. Conversations between faculty members carried an undertone of concern that hadn't been present before. Students from the Outer Rim colonies received more frequent messages from home, and several had been called away for family emergencies that seemed to occur with unusual frequency. Marcus maintained his carefully cultivated image of academic mediocrity while monitoring these developments. During his advanced stellar cartography class, he learned that 3 systems in the outer territories had been declared temporarily off-limits to civilian traffic due to navigational hazards. Professor Zandra, a Zephyrian instructor whose skin normally displayed calm blue hues, showed flashes of worried purple when discussing the restricted zones. "Are these navigational hazards natural phenomena?" asked Kira, a Manthari student whose family operated merchant vessels throughout the sector. Professor Zandra's crystalline features flickered between blue and purple. "The official reports cite asteroid field instabilities and solar radiation fluctuations. Standard safety protocols require avoiding these areas until conditions improve." Marcus raised his hand with apparent reluctance. "Professor, wouldn't long-range sensors detect those kinds of hazards well in advance? Most merchant ships have equipment that can map asteroid movements and solar activity from several light-years away." The question prompted a moment of uncomfortable silence. Professor Zandra's skin shifted to a deeper purple before stabilizing back to blue. "Sensor technology has limitations, Mr. Chen. Sometimes conditions change more rapidly than our instruments can predict." After class, Marcus noticed that several students lingered to ask additional questions about the restricted zones. The concern in their voices suggested that families and communities were being affected by more than simple navigation hazards. As Marcus gathered his materials, he caught fragments of worried conversations about missing cargo shipments and delayed passenger transports. Elena approached him as he prepared to leave the classroom. "Walk with me to the library?" Marcus nodded, falling into step beside her as they made their way through the corridor. Elena waited until they were away from other students before speaking. "My cousin works for a shipping company that operates in the Outer Rim," she said quietly. "According to her last message, they've lost contact with 4 cargo vessels in the past month. The company is calling it equipment failure, but the ships were all carrying different types of cargo to different destinations." Marcus felt his pulse quicken, though he kept his expression neutral. Space travel has always involved risks. Equipment failure isn't uncommon in the outer territories. 4 ships in a month, Marcus. All from the same company, all carrying valuable cargo, all disappearing in areas that are now conveniently restricted to civilian traffic. Elena's voice carried a frustration that suggested she had been thinking about this for some time. "Don't you find that coincidental?" They entered the library, finding their usual study area in one of the quieter sections. Elena activated a privacy screen around their table, a standard feature that students use to avoid distractions during examinations or group work. But Marcus recognized that she was also ensuring their conversation couldn't be overheard. "Elena, what exactly are you suggesting?" She leaned forward, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "I'm suggesting that someone is taking ships and cargo, and the authorities are covering it up by declaring those areas dangerous. I'm suggesting that whatever happened at the Harmony Festival wasn't just diplomatic socializing. And I'm suggesting that you know more about all of this than you're pretending to." Marcus felt the careful balance of his cover identity shifting. Elena's intelligence and persistence had led her to conclusions that were both accurate and dangerous. He had 2 choices: attempt to deflect her suspicions or find a way to control the information she was gathering. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. "Because you're the only person in this academy who asks the right questions without seeming to have an agenda. Because you notice things that other people miss, and because I think you're conducting your own investigation into what's happening out there." Elena reached into her bag and retrieved a small device that looked like a standard student calculator. But when she activated it, the screen displayed shipping records, communication logs, and navigation data that should have been restricted to authorized personnel. "How did you access this information?" Elena smiled grimly. "My family didn't send me to this academy just for the education. My father works for colonial intelligence, and he taught me that sometimes the best way to learn the truth is to look for patterns that other people are trying to hide." Marcus stared at the data on Elena's device, recognizing several items that corresponded to his own intelligence gathering. She had been conducting a parallel investigation, using different methods but reaching similar conclusions. The missing ships, the restricted zones, and the increased diplomatic activity were all connected to something larger than either of them had initially suspected. Elena, this is dangerous information. If you're right about what's happening, then the people responsible have significant resources and influence. I know. That's why I need help from someone who understands how to investigate without being detected. She looked directly at Marcus, someone who has training in intelligence operations. The accusation hung in the air between them. Elena had moved beyond suspicion to direct confrontation, and Marcus realized that his carefully constructed cover was no longer sustainable. She had gathered enough evidence to pose serious questions about his background, and her family connections meant those questions might reach people with the authority to investigate further. Marcus made a decision that went against his training, but felt like the only viable option. If I were to hypothetically know something about intelligence operations, what would you want from me? Elena's expression shifted from confrontational to hopeful. Cooperation. You have skills and access that I don't. I have information and family connections that you might find useful. Together, we might be able to figure out what's really happening before more people disappear. Marcus considered the proposal carefully. Elena represented both a security risk and a potential asset. Her intelligence and resources could accelerate his investigation, but involving a civilian in an active operation violated numerous protocols. On the other hand, Elena was already conducting her own investigation and would continue whether he cooperated or not. Hypothetically, Marcus said slowly, if someone were conducting intelligence operations, they would need to establish secure communication protocols and ensure that any shared information couldn't be traced back to either party. Elena nodded eagerly. I can arrange that. My family has access to encrypted communication networks that operate outside standard monitoring systems. Marcus looked around the library, noting the positions of other students and the locations of surveillance sensors. The decision to trust Elena felt like stepping off a cliff, but sometimes the greatest risks offered the greatest opportunities for success. There's something you need to understand, he said quietly. If we're going to work together, there can't be any deception between us. The situation in this sector is more serious than missing cargo ships. People's lives are at stake, and the organizations involved have the power to make problems disappear permanently. Elena's expression grew serious. I understand. My cousin's ship was carrying medical supplies to a research station that's now listed as abandoned. If someone is stealing medical supplies from remote colonies, people are dying because of it. Marcus felt a surge of respect for Elena's commitment to uncovering the truth. Even in the face of personal danger, she reminded him of why he had chosen his profession in the first place, to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. All right, he said, but we do this carefully and we do it right. One mistake could expose both of us and end any chance of stopping whatever is happening out there. Elena smiled for the first time since the conversation began. So where do we start? Marcus activated his own modified datapad, displaying a star chart that showed the patterns he had been tracking. We start by mapping exactly what's been taken and where, because I have a feeling that the missing ships are just the beginning. Working together, Marcus and Elena established a routine that appeared completely normal to outside observers, while allowing them to share intelligence and coordinate their investigation. They studied together in the library, attended the same elective courses, and occasionally ate meals at the same table in the dining hall. To their classmates and instructors, they seemed like two students who had developed a comfortable friendship based on shared academic interests. In reality, their partnership had transformed both of their investigative capabilities. Elena's access to colonial intelligence networks provided Marcus with information that would have taken weeks to obtain through his own channels. Marcus's analytical training helped Elena organize her findings into patterns that revealed the scope of what they were uncovering. The picture that emerged was far more complex than either had initially suspected. The missing ships were part of a systematic operation that targeted specific types of cargo and personnel. Medical supplies, advanced technology components, and individuals with expertise in fields like xenobiology and stellar engineering were being extracted from the Outer Rim territories with remarkable precision. "Look at this pattern," Elena said during one of their evening study sessions. She displayed a holographic map that showed shipping routes throughout the sector. Every missing vessel was carrying at least one item or person that relates to long-range space exploration or colony establishment. Marcus studied the data, cross-referencing it with intelligence reports he had received through his own networks. The timing is significant too. The disappearances started increasing about 6 months ago, right after the galactic hegemony announced new restrictions on independent exploration beyond the established colonial boundaries. Elena highlighted several star systems on the map. "My father mentioned that colonial intelligence has been tracking increased activity in unexplored regions near the galactic rim. Ships that don't respond to standard identification requests, energy signatures that don't match any known technology." The implications sent a chill through Marcus. If Elena's information was accurate, then the missing ships and personnel weren't being destroyed or stolen for profit. They were being collected by someone who was building the capability to establish colonies or bases beyond the reach of the established galactic powers. "Elena, who else knows about your father's intelligence reports?" "Just family members with appropriate clearance levels. Why?" Marcus stood and began pacing around their private study area. "Because if this information has reached colonial intelligence, then other intelligence agencies probably have similar reports. Which means the galactic hegemony knows something unusual is happening, but they're not taking visible action to stop it." Elena's expression grew troubled. "You think they're involved?" "I think they're either involved or they're being very careful not to provoke whoever is responsible." Marcus returned to the table and activated his own device. "Look at the official response to each incident. Navigation hazards, equipment failures, communication breakdowns. Every explanation is designed to discourage investigation without raising alarm." They spent the next hour analyzing communication traffic between various government agencies and military commands. The pattern of message routing revealed something disturbing. Information about the disappearances was being compartmentalized, with different agencies receiving only partial reports. No single organization outside the highest levels of the hegemony had access to the complete picture. "This is a cover-up," Elena said flatly. "Someone in the hegemony leadership is either orchestrating these disappearances or protecting whoever is responsible." Marcus nodded grimly. "Which means our investigation has just become exponentially more dangerous. We're not just tracking criminals or rogue traders. We're potentially exposing a conspiracy that involves the highest levels of galactic government." As if summoned by their conversation, Marcus's communication device chimed with an encrypted message from his handlers. The text was brief but urgent. "Accelerate timeline. Situation deteriorating. New intelligence suggests major operation planned within 30 days. Require immediate actionable intelligence on responsible parties and operational base locations." Marcus showed the message to Elena, who read it twice before looking up with wide eyes. 30 days until what? I don't know, but my people are clearly concerned enough to risk exposing my operation by sending urgent communications. Marcus deleted the message and activated additional security protocols on his device. "Elena, I need to ask something of you that goes beyond what we've been doing." "What do you need?" "I need you to use your family connections to access information that probably exceeds your father's security clearance. I need details about hegemony leadership communications, military deployment patterns, and any intelligence reports about activity beyond the galactic rim." Elena considered the request seriously. "That kind of access could expose my father to serious consequences if it's detected. It could end his career or worse." "I understand. But if we're right about what's happening, then 30 days from now, career consequences might be the least of anyone's concerns." Elena was quiet for several minutes, weighing the risks against the potential consequences of inaction. Finally, she nodded. "I'll talk to my father. If I explain what we've discovered, he might be willing to take the risk. Be careful how you approach him. If there are hegemony officials involved in this conspiracy, then even colonial intelligence networks might not be secure." Elena gathered her materials and prepared to leave the library. "Marcus, there's something else. During the Harmony Festival, I noticed that several diplomatic families received messages that caused them to cut their visit short. At the time I thought it was coincidental, but now I'm wondering if someone warned them about something. Marcus felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. What kind of warnings? The kind that suggest people in positions of authority knew something was going to happen and wanted their families safely away from potential targets. After Elena left, Marcus remained in the library to process the implications of what they had discussed. If diplomatic families had been quietly warned about potential threats, then the conspiracy involved not just operational planning, but advanced knowledge of specific timing and targets. The 30-day timeline mentioned in his orders suddenly took on new significance. Marcus accessed his secure communication network and composed a detailed report summarizing their findings. The information would reach his superiors within hours, but he suspected they already knew more than they had shared with him. His role was becoming clearer. He wasn't just gathering intelligence about criminal activity. He was investigating a threat significant enough to destabilize the existing galactic order. As he prepared to return to his dormitory, Marcus reflected on how much his situation had changed since Elena had confronted him about his background. What had begun as a routine intelligence operation had evolved into something far more complex and dangerous. But it had also given him something he hadn't expected, a partner whose skills and determination complemented his own. The next morning brought news that confirmed their worst fears. 3 more ships had disappeared overnight, all from different sectors but following the same pattern of carrying valuable cargo and skilled personnel. The official explanations cited the usual technical problems and navigational hazards, but Marcus and Elena recognized the signs of systematic extraction. Whatever was happening in the Outer Rim territories was accelerating, and they were running out of time to stop it. The only question was whether they could uncover the truth before the conspiracy achieved whatever goal justified taking such enormous risks with galactic stability. As Marcus walked to his first class of the day, he noticed additional security personnel stationed throughout the academy. Their presence was discreet but unmistakable to someone trained to recognize such things. The authorities were clearly taking precautions, but whether they were protecting the students or monitoring them remained unclear. The investigation had reached a critical phase, and Marcus realized that the next few days would determine whether they uncovered the truth in time to prevent a catastrophe, or whether they became the next casualties of a conspiracy that seemed to grow more dangerous with each new discovery. Elena's father responded to her request faster than expected, but not in the way she had hoped. Instead of providing access to classified intelligence, Commander Miguel Vasquez arrived at Kepler Station Academy unannounced, requesting an immediate private meeting with his daughter. The sudden appearance of a colonial intelligence officer sent subtle ripples of tension through the Academy's administrative staff. Marcus observed the reunion from across the dining hall, noting the body language between Elena and her father. Their conversation was intense but quiet, with Elena gesturing occasionally toward data displays on her personal device. Commander Vasquez's responses were measured and cautious, suggesting he was taking her information seriously while remaining concerned about the implications. After 30 minutes, Elena approached Marcus with a carefully neutral expression. "My father would like to speak with both of us, privately." The meeting took place in one of the Academy's conference rooms, normally used for diplomatic training exercises. Commander Vasquez was a lean man in his 50s, with the alert bearing of someone accustomed to analyzing threats and making rapid decisions. His eyes moved between Marcus and Elena, with the calculating gaze of a professional intelligence officer. "Elena has shared some interesting theories about recent shipping disruptions." Commander Vasquez began without preamble. "She's also suggested that you might have insights into these matters that exceed what would be expected from a typical student." Marcus recognized an interrogation when he encountered one, even when conducted in polite terms. "I've noticed some patterns that seem unusual, sir, but I'm hardly qualified to interpret their significance." Commander Vasquez smiled thinly, modest and careful, admirable qualities in a young person. He activated a security device that created a privacy field around their table. "Now, shall we discuss who you really are, and why Colonial Intelligence has no record of a Marcus Chen transferring to this academy from Kepler 442b? The moment of truth had arrived sooner than Marcus had anticipated. Elena's father had obviously conducted his own investigation after their conversation, and Marcus's cover identity hadn't withstood professional scrutiny. He could continue the deception, but doing so would likely end any possibility of cooperation and might expose Elena to suspicion about her own activities. "My name is Marcus Chen, but I'm not from an agricultural colony." Marcus met Commander Vasquez's gaze directly. "I'm here on assignment from Human Intelligence Command. My mission involves investigating the disappearances that Elena discovered through her own research." Elena looked surprised despite her suspicions about Marcus's background. "Human Intelligence Command? I thought you might be colonial intelligence or maybe corporate security." "HIC operates differently than other agencies," Commander Vasquez explained to his daughter. "They handle situations that cross jurisdictional boundaries or involve multiple species. If they sent someone to investigate these disappearances, then the threat level is considerably higher than I initially assessed." Commander Vasquez turned back to Marcus. "What has your investigation revealed?" Marcus summarized their findings, including the systematic targeting of specific personnel and cargo, the coordinated cover-up by hegemony authorities, and the evidence suggesting preparation for major operations beyond the galactic rim. Commander Vasquez listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly grim. "The timeline Elena mentioned, 30 days. What happens then?" "I don't know specifically, but my handlers believe something significant is being planned. The acceleration of disappearances suggests whoever is responsible is moving toward an operational deadline." Commander Vasquez was quiet for several minutes, clearly weighing information that Marcus and Elena weren't privy to. Finally, he made a decision. "There are things you need to know that will help you understand the scope of what you're investigating. But first I need assurances that this information will be handled with appropriate security." Marcus nodded. "I am authorized to coordinate with Allied intelligence services when operational requirements dictate. 3 weeks ago, long-range monitoring stations detected massive energy signatures from a region approximately 50 light-years beyond the established colonial boundary. The signatures were consistent with large-scale industrial operations, possibly including ship construction and resource extraction. When scout vessels were dispatched to investigate, they encountered vessels of unknown configuration that demonstrated technology significantly in advance of current galactic standards." Elena leaned forward. "Advanced technology? How advanced?" "Propulsion systems that exceed our fastest ships by a factor of 3. Defensive capabilities that rendered our scout vessels' weapons ineffective. Communication jamming that prevented any detailed intelligence gathering." Commander Vasquez's expression was troubled. "Elena, the missing ships and personnel aren't being stolen. They're being recruited." Marcus felt the pieces of the puzzle suddenly rearrange themselves into a new and more disturbing picture. "Recruited by whom? We don't know. But whoever they are, they're building something that requires specific expertise and resources. The pattern of disappearances suggests they're assembling the capability to establish permanent settlements or bases in regions beyond our current reach." Elena processed this information quickly. The Harmony Festival. The diplomatic warnings. Someone knew this was coming. Certain hegemony officials have been aware of unusual activity beyond the rim for months, Commander Vasquez confirmed. The official policy has been to avoid provoking whoever is responsible, while quietly strengthening defensive capabilities in the outer territories. Marcus understood the implications immediately. But if these unknowns have technology that exceeds our capabilities, then strengthening existing defenses might not be sufficient. Exactly. Which is why HIC and Colonial Intelligence have been tasked with gathering actionable intelligence about their capabilities and intentions. Commander Vasquez looked at both young people seriously. "And why your investigation has become critically important?" Elena raised a question that had been troubling Marcus as well. "Why target this academy? Why place an agent here rather than in the outer territories where the disappearances are occurring?" "Because this academy hosts the children of sector leadership," Marcus replied. "Information flows through family connections that might not appear in official communications, and because someone suspected that the conspiracy involved hegemony officials." Commander Vasquez nodded approvingly. "Very good. Elena, your partner understands the strategic value of apparently peripheral positions." Elena blushed slightly at the description of Marcus as her partner, but her expression remained focused on the intelligence briefing. "What do you need from us?" "Continued surveillance of Academy communications and diplomatic interactions." These unknowns are clearly receiving inside information about shipping schedules and personnel assignments. Someone with access to high-level intelligence is providing assistance, and this academy represents a concentration of people with such access. Marcus felt a chill of understanding. We're not just investigating the disappearances. We're looking for a traitor. Multiple traitors, most likely. An operation of this scope would require assistance from multiple agencies and jurisdictions. Commander Vasquez deactivated the privacy field and prepared to leave. Be extremely careful about who you trust and what information you share. If our suspicions are correct, then anyone connected to hegemony leadership could potentially be compromised. After Commander Vasquez departed, Marcus and Elena sat in the empty conference room, processing the magnitude of what they had learned. Their investigation had evolved from tracking missing ships to uncovering evidence of what could be the most significant threat to galactic stability in centuries. Marcus, are you afraid? Elena asked quietly. Marcus considered the question honestly. Yes, but I'm more afraid of what happens if we don't succeed. Elena nodded. Then we'd better get back to work. As they returned to their dormitories, Marcus reflected on how much had changed in a few hours. Elena now knew his true identity. Her father was aware of their investigation, and they had confirmed that the conspiracy reached into the highest levels of galactic government. The stakes had increased dramatically, but so had their resources and support. The next phase of their mission would require even greater care and sophistication. They were no longer simply gathering intelligence. They were hunting for traitors who had access to some of the most sensitive information in known space. And they had less than 30 days to succeed before whatever was being planned in the outer darkness came to fruition. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new dangers. But tonight Marcus allowed himself to feel cautiously optimistic. Elena had proven to be an exceptional partner, and her father's support provided connections to resources he hadn't expected to have. The investigation was far from over, but for the first time since arriving at the academy, Marcus felt like they might actually have a chance to prevent whatever catastrophe was approaching. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Kelmar, the Academy's senior communications instructor, approached Marcus after class with what appeared to be a routine academic question. The elderly Menthari's compound eyes glittered with more than scholarly interest as he gestured for Marcus to remain after the other students had departed. Mr. Chen, your recent assignments have demonstrated remarkable insight into communication protocol analysis. I wonder if you might be interested in assisting with a special research project. Marcus recognized the careful phrasing of someone making unofficial contact. What kind of research, Professor? Dr. Kelmar activated a privacy screen around his desk, his mandibles clicking in what Marcus had learned to recognize as the Menthari equivalent of nervous energy. The kind that investigates anomalies in official communication traffic that shouldn't exist according to standard protocols. Elena, who had been waiting outside the classroom, was invited to join the conversation when Dr. Kelmar learned of their academic partnership. The professor's research had uncovered something that aligned perfectly with their investigation. Unauthorized communication channels operating within the Academy's network infrastructure. 3 weeks ago, I detected data transmissions using encryption protocols that exceed Academy security clearances, Dr. Kelmar explained, displaying complex signal analysis charts on his desk interface. The transmissions occur during routine maintenance windows when monitoring systems are operating at reduced capacity. Marcus studied the data patterns, recognizing sophisticated techniques for concealing message traffic within normal network operations. Have you been able to decrypt any of the transmissions? Partially. The encryption is military grade, but certain transmission headers contain routing information that reveals destination coordinates. Dr. Kelmar highlighted specific data points on his charts. The signals are being sent to locations that don't appear in any official galactic navigation databases. Elena leaned forward to examine the coordinates more closely. These match the regions where my father said they detected those energy signatures. Someone at this academy is communicating with whoever is operating beyond the galactic rim. The revelation confirmed their worst suspicions while providing the first concrete evidence of treachery within the academy. Dr. Kelmar had unknowingly uncovered proof that someone with access to the academy's communication systems was providing intelligence to the mysterious operators in the unexplored regions. Professor, Why are you sharing this information with us? Marcus asked carefully. Dr. Kellemar's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Because I have been observing both of you for several weeks. Your questions during lectures, your research patterns in the library, your careful attention to details that other students overlook. Either you are remarkably perceptive young scholars, or you are conducting an investigation that extends beyond academic curiosity. Elena exchanged glances with Marcus before making a decision. Professor, if we were to tell you that we're investigating the disappearances of ships and personnel in the outer territories, would you be willing to assist our research? I suspected as much. Yes, Ms. Vasquez, I would be honored to assist. These unauthorized transmissions represent a violation of Academy security protocols and potentially threaten the safety of our students and their families. Dr. Kellemar's offer of assistance provided Marcus and Elena with capabilities they hadn't possessed before. The professor's expertise in communication, analysis, and his access to Academy technical systems could help them identify who was sending the unauthorized transmissions and when the next messages might be transmitted. Working together over the following days, they established a monitoring routine that allowed them to trace the unauthorized signals in real time. The transmissions originated from multiple locations within the Academy, suggesting that several individuals were involved in the conspiracy. More disturbing, the timing of messages corresponded to specific events: arrival of new students, departure of visiting dignitaries, and scheduling of intersystem transportation. Look at this pattern, Elena said during one of their evening analysis sessions. Every transmission occurs within hours of receiving information about personnel movements or cargo shipments. Someone is providing real-time intelligence about targets for the missing ship operations. Marcus cross-referenced the transmission timing with his own intelligence reports. Elena, these signals are being sent before ships disappear. Whoever is responsible isn't just stealing random vessels. They're receiving advance notice about specific targets worth taking. Dr. Kellemar's antenna twitched with agitation. This suggests coordination between Academy personnel and external operators on a scale that could compromise the security of the entire sector. Their investigation received urgent new direction when Marcus received another encrypted message from his handlers. Intelligence suggests major operation imminent. Recommend immediate extraction unless actionable intelligence can be provided within 72 hours. Situation becoming too dangerous for continued undercover operations. Marcus showed the message to Elena and Dr. Kellemar, explaining the implications. My superiors believe whatever is being planned will happen within the next few days. They want to extract me before the situation becomes untenable. Elena's expression was determined. Then we need to identify the source of these transmissions before you leave. If the Academy is compromised, students and faculty are in immediate danger. Dr. Kellemar had been analyzing transmission data while they spoke. I believe I can narrow down the source locations to specific terminals within the Academy. The signal analysis suggests 3 primary transmission points, all in areas with restricted access. Where? Marcus asked. The administrative offices, the diplomatic quarters, and the communications center itself. Dr. Kellemar's mandibles clicked rapidly. One of these locations is being used by someone with the highest levels of security clearance. Elena understood the implications immediately. Dr. Veltar, Chancellor Zixtal's liaison office, or one of the senior communication technicians. Any of them would have the access and opportunity to send unauthorized transmissions. Marcus felt pieces of the puzzle fitting together in a pattern that was both logical and terrifying. The Academy wasn't just a school. It was an intelligence hub where information about the entire sector flowed through families, diplomatic channels, and administrative communications. Someone with access to these information streams was providing targeting data for systematic theft of ships, cargo, and personnel. We need to identify which of these locations is being used and by whom, Marcus said. But we also need to do it without alerting the traitors that they've been discovered. Dr. Kellemar's research had revealed something else that added urgency to their timeline. The transmission frequency has increased dramatically over the past week. Whoever is sending these messages is providing intelligence for an operation that appears to be reaching a critical phase. Elena accessed her father's secure communication network to relay their findings to colonial intelligence. The response was immediate and alarming. Advanced scout ships detected massive fleet movements in unexplored regions. Estimated 200-plus vessels of unknown configuration, proceeding toward established colonial boundaries. Recommend immediate evacuation of Outer Rim territories. Marcus stared at the message, understanding finally dawning on him. They're not just stealing ships and personnel. They're building an invasion fleet. Dr. Kelmar's compound eyes reflected the light from their displays as he processed the implications. And someone at this academy has been providing them with intelligence about our defensive capabilities, shipping schedules, and population centers. Elena's voice was grim. Which means we have less than 72 hours to stop them before they have enough information to overwhelm our outer defenses. The investigation had reached its climax. Everything they had discovered was leading toward a confrontation that would determine whether the mysterious operators beyond the galactic rim would succeed in their apparent invasion plans, or whether the traitors at Kepler Station Academy could be exposed in time to prevent catastrophe. Marcus looked at his partners in this increasingly dangerous mission. Then we'd better figure out who's sending those transmissions, because if we're right about what's coming, the next few days will determine the fate of every colony in this sector. Time was running out, but they finally had the tools and evidence needed to identify the source of the treachery. The question was whether they could act quickly enough to make a difference, or whether they would become the first casualties of an invasion that had been planned with inside assistance from the highest levels of galactic society. The final confrontation began with the routine announcement of an emergency drill. Dr. Veltar's voice echoed through the Academy's corridors, instructing students and faculty to proceed to designated safety areas while technical personnel verified system integrity. To most observers, it appeared to be a standard security exercise. To Marcus, Elena, and Dr. Kelmar, it represented the perfect opportunity to monitor who had access to communication systems during the drill. They had positioned themselves in the Communication Center's auxiliary monitoring station, a location that provided access to real-time transmission data without requiring them to be physically present at the primary terminals. Dr. Kelmar's expertise had enabled them to set up passive surveillance that would detect any unauthorized signals without alerting the sender. Signal initiated, Dr. Kelmar announced quietly, his compound eyes focused on the data streams flowing across his displays. Source location confirmed, diplomatic quarters, sublevel 3. Elena checked the Academy's personnel database. That's Chancellor Zixtel's private office. She's supposed to be in the main assembly area with the other diplomatic staff. Marcus felt the familiar rush of adrenaline that accompanied the resolution of a long investigation. She's not participating in the drill because she's using it as cover to send intelligence about the Academy's emergency procedures. The transmission lasted for precisely 90 seconds before terminating. Dr. Kelmar's analysis revealed that the signal contained detailed information about the Academy's defensive systems, evacuation protocols, and the current locations of all diplomatic families and senior military personnel. This is it, Elena said grimly. She's providing them with everything they need to target this facility specifically. Marcus activated his emergency communication protocol, sending an encrypted alert to his handlers with confirmation of the traitor's identity and current activity. The response was immediate. Confirmed. Fleet movements suggest attack on Academy imminent. Prepare for immediate tactical support. The Academy's emergency drill took on new significance as Marcus, Elena, and Dr. Kelmar realized they were potentially witnessing the final intelligence gathering phase before an actual assault. Chancellor Zixtal, one of the most respected diplomatic figures in the sector, had been providing targeting information to the mysterious fleet advancing from beyond the galactic rim. Why would she do this? Elena asked, her voice reflecting the bewilderment they all felt. She's Zephyrian nobility, with family and political connections throughout the sector. What could motivate her to betray everything she's sworn to protect? Dr. Kelmar's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Perhaps motivation isn't the correct question. Perhaps we should ask what she's been promised in return. Their answer came sooner than expected. The emergency drill concluded, but instead of returning to normal operations, the Academy's external sensors detected approaching vessels that didn't respond to standard identification requests. Dr. Veltar's announcement confirmed their worst fears. All personnel remain in designated safety areas. Unknown vessels are approaching the station. This is not a drill. Through the auxiliary monitoring station's external feeds, They watched as sleek ships of unfamiliar design emerged from hyperspace around Kepler Station Academy. The vessels moved with precision that suggested advanced propulsion technology and coordinated tactical planning. Most disturbing, they approached along vectors that avoided the Academy's primary defensive sensors, indicating detailed knowledge of the station's security systems. Marcus received a final message from his handlers. Extraction impossible. Hold position and gather intelligence on hostile capabilities. Support en route but arrival time uncertain. Elena gripped his arm. Marcus, we're trapped here. Those ships know exactly how to approach without triggering our defenses because Chancellor Zixtal told them. The first boarding craft attached to the Academy's diplomatic section, exactly where they would expect to find visiting dignitaries and government officials. Marcus realized that the mysterious operators weren't just invading. They were conducting a surgical extraction of specific individuals whose knowledge and influence could serve their purposes. Dr. Kelmar's monitoring equipment detected massive, jamming signals that prevented any communication with forces outside the Academy. We're isolated. Whatever happens here, we're on our own until support arrives. Elena activated her father's emergency protocols, sending a final burst transmission that summarized their investigation and identified Chancellor Zixtal as the source of intelligence leaks. The message disappeared into the communication jamming, but Elena hoped it had reached colonial intelligence before the systems were completely compromised. The Academy's internal sensors revealed that the boarding parties moved with military precision toward specific objectives: the communications center, the administrative offices, and the diplomatic quarters. They weren't conducting a random assault. They were executing a carefully planned operation to capture key personnel and intelligence resources. Marcus made a decision that went against his training, but felt like the only viable option. We're going to stop them. Elena looked at him in surprise. How? We're students and a professor, not a military unit. We have something they don't expect: knowledge of their plan and the Academy systems. Marcus gestured toward Dr. Kelmar's monitoring displays. We know where they're going and why, and we have access to communication and security, systems that they're assuming are already compromised. Dr. Kelmar's antenna twitched with what Marcus had learned to recognize as the Manthari equivalent of determination. What do you propose? Marcus outlined a plan that utilized their unique position and capabilities. Dr. Kelmar could manipulate the Academy's internal communication systems to mislead the boarding parties about the locations of their primary objectives. Elena could use her knowledge of diplomatic protocols to evacuate key personnel through routes that the attackers wouldn't expect. Marcus would attempt to capture Chancellor Zixtal and prevent her from providing additional intelligence to the attacking forces. The plan was desperate and dangerous, but it represented their only chance to disrupt an operation that had been planned with inside assistance for months. As they prepared to implement their strategy, Marcus reflected on how far they had come from the simple investigation that had brought them together. Elena had evolved from a curious student into a capable intelligence operative. Dr. Kelmar had proven that academic expertise could be as valuable as military training when applied with courage and determination, and Marcus had learned that sometimes the most effective operations were conducted not by professional agents working alone, but by teams of individuals who brought different skills and perspectives to complex challenges. The next few hours would determine whether their improvised resistance could delay the attackers long enough for help to arrive, or whether they would become casualties of the most sophisticated intelligence operation Marcus had ever encountered. But as they moved to implement their plan, Marcus felt confident that they had given their investigation everything they had to offer. The mysterious operators beyond the galactic rim had underestimated the determination of 3 individuals who refused to accept that treachery and superior technology guaranteed victory. Sometimes the greatest advantage in any conflict was simply refusing to give up. And Marcus knew that whatever happened next, they had earned the right to fight for the principles they believed in. The final phase of their mission was about to begin, and Marcus Chen was no longer the unremarkable transfer student that nobody noticed. He was exactly where he needed to be, with exactly the partners he needed, ready to prove that sometimes the most important battles were fought not by fleets and armies, but by individuals who chose to stand up when everything seemed hopeless.